And he's a guy who was known to take things. I mean, he took things early in his career. Remember when he fought Randy when he was 19? He was 240 pounds.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
His neck started at the top of his head.
What's up, guys? Derek, moreplaysmoredates.com. Today we're going to be talking about the top 5 UFC physiques that just completely melted away after the tightening up of enforcement of, like PED regulation, the entry of USADA into the regulation of, drug abuse in the sport, preventing people from getting away with PEDs and whatnot. Obviously, it still happened, or else people wouldn't be getting popped for aromatase inhibitors, selective estrogen receptor modulators, and other ancillaries which would otherwise not be used in a performance-enhancing context, but only really make sense to deploy as an adjunct treatment or an ancillary on cycle or in a post-cycle therapy context. But with that being said, obviously a lot of physiques have just completely melted after USADA came in and started really tightening up on their regulation to whatever extent they're doing it. And I just wanted to go into some of the most blatant examples from after that was enacted. The first example, and often goes unaddressed in my opinion, is Thiago Alves. And this guy was super hyped up back in the 2010s era, I guess you can call it, and when he was poised to fight against GSP. He ended up losing, but this guy had a nuts physique. He almost reminded me of Sean Shirk, just compact and just like a tank pretty much. And this guy had an awesome physique back in the day, and you can see him at the UFC 90 weigh-ins, and here he was weighing in at 170 plus and shredded. So there against Koscheck, he weighs in at 171, and then against Koscheck, you can see he balloons back up already. He looks like he's like 200 pounds with abs. The guy's just a tank. And yeah, this was one of the most blatant examples, in my opinion, of somebody who just completely melted after USADA was enacted in 2015. This guy went from just a fucking house to being a spitting image of what he once was. And here he is in one of his matches. I think this might have been against Matt Hughes. I might be wrong here, but look at him. He's like fucking single digit body fat percentage almost, with traps eating his fucking head almost, and just a tank. This guy is blatantly on gear, in my opinion, here. And then as you go to, even in 2012, you can see he gained over 30 pounds in 3 hours after the weigh-ins. And then after 2015, within just a year, he's already missing weight for a lightweight bout where he's 10 pounds lighter but looks significantly downsized. So here he weighs in and he's at about, I forget what it is, it might be 162.
162.6.
So I don't think I really need to go into detail about what is different about his physique. Like, you can just see clear as day the amount of muscle that's been stripped off of his arms, his traps, his delts. I mean, he's walking around with almost 10 pounds less lean tissue after just a year of USADA being enacted. And then going forward to 2019, he's back at welterweight, but you can see his physique is just so soft now. It's just all that weight he gained back is just pure fluff. And it's just a really obvious example, in my opinion, that often doesn't get brought to light about a physique that was clearly on gear, that definitely downsized significantly thereafter. And how much of a difference that potential use may have had on his performance remains up for speculation, but it does look like he was starting to lose quite a bit of fights even before 2015. So how much it really impacted his performance at the end of the day, it's tough to say. Sometimes these fighters having more muscle mass can actually hinder them by just eating up oxygen and whatnot. So who really knows, but it is just a very good example of somebody who definitely couldn't hide the fact that they were enhanced prior and just completely regressed thereafter. The next example is Johnny Hendricks. So everyone knows of this example. He had like visible abs at weigh-in. He's pretty damn jacked for a guy who does not really have a good foundation of muscle mass. Or at least, his genetic baseline is not very impressive. And at UFC 167, apparently his physique became the catalyst for USADA testing to come into play, or at least some speculate it was. And leading up to the fight, he, despite agreeing publicly to the testing that GSP offered to pay for advanced level drug testing, he ended up declining at the end of the day. And people think that this had a big role on the new level of strict testing coming into play and being used in the UFC thereafter. And you can see see his physique just totally disintegrated thereafter and gained a ton of fat and lost a significant amount of muscle. So I think that one's often addressed and is one of the main before and afters that are just clear as day, in my opinion. You can't prove any of this at the end of the day, but this is just my personal opinion. The next example is TJ Dillashaw. So prior to the enactment of USADA testing, he looked pretty damn jacked, honestly. He was shredded and holding a decent amount of size. I guess for his weight class, it's a good amount of size. And thereafter, he did sort of pack on a decent amount of fat and have a negative recomp, basically, where he just gained fat and lost muscle. And a lot of people refer to this as a very obvious example too. And with him getting busted recently with EPO, I think it just further reinforces the lack of credibility he would have if he was to state that he wasn't enhanced prior. I think it's pretty obvious that he was likely using some sort of anabolic assistance prior to 2015, and thereafter probably started to address other ways he could go about improving his performance, because anabolics in themselves have a pretty comparable impact on oxygen carrying capacity, like similar to what EPO does. So maybe he was using anabolics prior and then switched to EPO thereafter because it was easier to avert testing or get around it, I should say. But who really knows at the end of the day? But I just think his history kind of reinforces the fact that this transformation or this negative deterioration of his physique kind of just reinforces the likelihood that he was using some sort of anabolics prior to USADA. And then the next example, which are the classics, we have Overeem, Alistair Overeem, before and after. This guy is just the fucking house of the UFC, or he was anyways, until USADA was implemented, and he just doesn't even look like the same person after. His, sagging chest that was a shelf prior, and his abs are way less cut up. Pretty much all his upper body mass has melted into love handles, and it's just, I don't think it really needs over analysis of what happened to this guy. Prior to USADA, insane physique. Thereafter, melted. To me, this is pretty flagship steroid use prior, at least in my opinion. And the final example, the most iconic back and forth transformation, Vitor Belfort. So this is actually one of my favorite fighters, and he kind of reminds me a bit of Paulo Costa a little bit in terms of just the physique type as well as the level of aggression in the ring. And this guy goes way back. His physique has gone up and down so many times now, and he's just the perfect example of what before gear, after gear, before gear, after gear really looks like. And if you go way back to his fights, some of the most iconic fights he's had against Tank Abbott were clearly outsized by Tank Abbott and just sheer mass, 270-pound Tank Abbott versus Vitor at 215. But this guy's just a tank in himself. His traps, massive. The entire physique, just like a men's physique, fitness model physique almost, but just athletic as hell. And then against Vanderlei Silva too, one of the most iconic fights of all time, where he just runs him across the ring and just completely devastates him within, I don't even know how long it was. I'm actually going to pull it up right now. This is like the highlight reel moment that everyone refers back to when they think of Vitor. He's only 21 years old here, and he's 199 pounds and easily single-digit body fat percentage, but holding so much mass. Thereafter, we can see his physique in the matches, subsequent to that. And after USADA is enacted, his physique just significantly regresses. And we've seen him on, TRT Belfort. We've seen heavily abusing Belfort. We've seen post-USADA Belfort. We've seen pretty much every stage of Vitor where he's had a nuts jacked physique, probably using super physiologic amounts and blasting his face off. We've seen him on TRT, and then we've seen him off of everything, and the difference is substantial. And not to take anything away from his performance and his skills as a fighter, obviously, but just sheerly evaluating the body composition, I think this is probably easily a top 3 example of before and after gear use. So just objectively looking at it though, without, not to take anything away from his performance or any of these guys' performances, honestly, this is just sheerly looking at their physiques and body composition with no bias. It's really obvious night and day differences here of what before and after steroid use probably looks like and what natural endogenous androgen production is actually capable of sustaining thereafter discontinuing exogenous hormone use. So anyways, take from that what you will. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Are there any examples of guys before and after that you think should have made the top 5 that were, super obvious like this, or even more obvious. Maybe I'm just overlooking some really obvious cases here. There were a lot of good examples, but these were the ones I thought stood out the most, so I included them. And let me know what you guys think. Please like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplates.com. Check me out on Instagram. Follow me there at moreplates_moredates, Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, BitChute, TikTok, wherever I am, Apple Podcasts. Talk to you guys soon.